We are holding at 10b3. We are holding on Yud Amid Beis at 10b3 at the beginning of the Gemara. We just finished learning the Mishnah and we're beginning the Gemara. So we were talking about things that you purchase with the Shekalim from the Trumas Halishcha. That in essence is what the Mishnah was about, and the various arguments about the money, that sacred money, what is it, what are you capable of purchasing with it? As we saw through the Mishnah, that not only are we talking about the Trumas Halishcha, which is the separating of the Lishcha's money, that would mean the Shekalim, there is also, we said there is profits from the Shirayim, the leftover money. If you remember, there are three boxes, Aleph, Beis, and Gimel, or its version of in the Greek language, where we pulled out money at the beginning before Pesach, and the leftover money that we didn't use was covered over with a leather covering, separating that money. Then we used the money in the box of the second box and then covered over the remaining money. Then we turned around and used the third box money at Sukkot time. And when that money was used up, we turned around and went back for the monies, the leftover monies, the shirayim that was left over from the second box and then the first box. And there are limitations on what you can use and what you can't use, what is considered holy and what is considered no longer holy. And that was all buried in this Mishnah and the Gemara that follows. Says the Gemara, Keves Para, the ramp of the Para Aduma. So the Para Aduma, the red heifer, which was subsequently burnt and put together with the Mei Chatos, being able to be used.
Where are you?
We are 10b3. 10b3.
Okay, I'm good. I'm ahead of you.
You got to 11? You got to 11.
I'm up to 11, but that's all right.
You're up to 11, yeah. So yesterday's Gemara took us far longer than it's normal to what it could. There was just a lot buried in it. And so we stopped at Yud Amid Beis. So,
good.
The Keves Para. So the ramp of the Para of the red heifer, which was used so that the cow itself was not used in no inappropriate way. The Mishnah said, and the strip of wool which is tied between its horns, meaning the strip of wool that was on the goat that was sent to Azazel, that was the he-goat on Yom Kippur that was sent to Azazel, which had a red strip tied between its horns, for two reasons, because it was ripped in half. One half to be thrown down the mountain together with the goat, and the second half to see if the miracle would happen, that it would change from red to white, signifying that the nation has been cleared of its averos. So, says the Gemara like this. Rabbi Yishmael bar Nachman b'shem Rabbi Yomi said as follows. Shloisha l'shaynesein. There were three strips of red wool, but each one had a distinct weight. Some were heavier than others. Shal soyer b'sela. The red strip that went between the goat that was sent to Azazel had to be long enough to be divided in two, half of which went down the mountain with the goat, half which had to be tied onto a rock to see about the miracle, whether it would turn from red to white. That needed to be the weight of a selah. Shel mitzayra b'shekel, the red strip that was part of the apparatus to sprinkle the blood onto the mitzayra during the mitzayra's purification process, needed to only weigh no more than a shekel, because not a lot was needed. It was simply there as part of the broom, for lack of a better word, the hyssop and the other stuff that was put together, that was dipped into the blood and sprinkled onto the person. The red strip of the paraduma, which is that part and parcel of killing the paraduma and putting its ashes into the water is that the pasuk says the words El Toich Serefa Sapara into the middle of the burning of the cow, into the toich El Toich into the midst of the burning cow. That tells us shall para b'shtei saloim. It had to weigh as heavy as shtei saloim. It had to sink. It had to have the ability to sink all the way into the ashes and the water so that it can get completely mixed up. It's a very sarcastic fire. Says the Gemara, a little different. From Bras Chavin said, Rabbi Bo Bar Zabul B'Shem Rab Shimon Bechalav shall para b'shnei saloim of Naksa. You need even more, 2.5 saloim. And we're saying, so as the Gemara of Istimapik Lishna V'Asar, and those who lose the language need to be weighed 10 zuz. The bottom line is they all equal the same. We're dealing with the same shear, the same amount. And the reason for this is because they were quoting from other people and they wanted to get their quotes exactly correctly, which is a function of the Gemara that we really try to get the words exactly the way they say. Says the Mishnah writer. So we said there were other things that were funded from the remainder of the Shirayim, from the leftover money that was in the Trumas Halishcha, in the treasury chamber, right after we do original rituals before Pesach, before Shavuos, and before Sukkot. The leftover monies, which we went back to, we said could be used for certain other communal needs. What are we talking about? The funds remain in the treasury chamber, in the Trumas Halishcha. Rabbi Yehuda b'Shem Rabbi Yishmael, Talmid Chachamim Hamlamis Kehanim HaHilchos Shchita, Hilchos Kabbalah, Hilchos Zirika. The Talmid Chachamim will teach the Kehanim the halachas that apply to them: Shchita, slaughtering; Kabbalah, how to accept the blood and how to take it and be served the blood and to throw the blood on the altar. Moikel Schara Mitrumas Halishcha will take their wages from the Shirayim, the remainder, the leftover monies that remained from the Shekalim, were withdrawn from the Trumas Halishcha. The only problem with this is, as we learned in Pesachim many times, that Shechita, in fact, does not require the Kohen. Shechita is bizarre, is kosher. So why were you allowed to use the holy money, the remainder leftover money of the Trumas Halishcha to pay the Kohanim? So the Rishonim explain, it's true, but since Kohanim have the first rights, they have the right to say, no, we want to do even the slaughtering, and they get the right to step up. Therefore, in reality, even though a Zer was allowed to, the reality was that 99 out of 100 times, it was the Kohanim themselves who were doing the Shechita. Says the Gemara weiter, Rav Yitzchak bar Redifa b'Shem Rav Imi, Nevakre Mume Kodshim Noitlin Sechar Mitrumas Halishcha. Those who check for mumim, for blemishes on the carbon seaboards, that means every carbon tumid that was bought every day had to be there 4 days before so that it could be checked to see that it did not have any disqualifying blemish. Those people who were the checkers got paid from the Shirayim, from the leftover of the Shekalim from the Trumas Halishcha. Rav Acha, Rabbi Tanchum Bar Chiya b'Shem Rav Simale say, Magihe Sefer HaZorah Noitel Schara Mitrumas Halishcha. Those who corrected the Sefer Torah in the Hazorah, that we're now on 10b4, 10b4, whoops, 10b4, second, okay. You guys can still see me and hear me, yes? Because my computer went down. Jerry, Charlie, you guys can hear me? Uh-oh. Yeah, I'm going to assume that we're good. Okay, we're good. No problem. So, okay. So the monies, there was a Sefer Torah that was kept in the Azara. There's simply, let's go with the simple shot, which is that there was a Sefer Torah, which of course was the playbook. That's the franchise book, the Torah. So that was the book that was the Torah. You look when you had to know where, you had to begin to know where to look for the halachas. So they, of course, this one that was constantly fixed up and all that after it was being used, those who fixed up that Sefer Torah could get paid from the Shivrayim, from the Chumas Alishcha. Others say you change the word from Azara to Sefer Ezra. This is the famous Sefer Torah known, the Sefer Torah of Ezra HaSeifa, as in Ezra and Nehemiah, that Ezra HaSeifa brought from Babel back to Eretz Yisrael at the beginning of the second Beis Hamikdash. And so this, you could imagine, this had tremendous, it was priceless, and it was tremendously cared for, and that was the prototype. The prototype for all the Sefer Torahs until today was that Sefer Torah that Ezra Sefer brought back from Babel, and that's what we're talking about over here. Either way, tangentially, it all has to do with carbon seedlers, with the public, right, with public offerings. And the reason for this is because Ayidei, all of this stuff, we sort of get various degrees of getting to the carbon. Says the Gemara Vayta, which still has
white. You have to leave it.
Gidal bar ben Yomin b'shem Ravasi. Gidal bar ben Yomin said in the name of Ravasi. Shnei dayoni gizelos neutlen sechora mitumas alishcha. The two judges of thefts, which really means the two monetary judges. The judges who were there to adjudicate monetary disputes and decide to give kidnosim, penalties, etc. They would be paid from their wages from the half shekels of the remaining half shekels withdrawn from the Trumas Alishcha. This is the first case which does not tangentially have anything to do with the bringing of the carbon sibur, with the communal offerings. Shmuel Rama, Noshim Oreigos Baparoichis, Noitlin Sechara Mitumas Alishcha. The women who would weave the curtains of the Beis Hamikdash would take their wages again from the leftover shkalim from the Trumas Alishcha. This again could be argued that it has something to do with the carpets, because on Yom Kippur, the chatos of the Yom Kippur, which of course is a communal offering, the blood was sprayed onto the curtain. But the bigger chiddush is Gidol Bas Binyamin, who says even those who are sitting there to adjudicate the cases, the monetary cases, they too could have the money withdrawn from the chamber. Again, you could also argue over there it had some connection to the carbon, because most of the cases adjudicated were purchases of animals that were going to be used for the kavanas. So in those cases, that's what they were there for, to adjudicate the problem. Rav Chona Omar mitrumas bedek habayis. Rav Chona said no. The women who wove the curtains. Give me 1 second. Just want to make sure that's not from one of us. No, that's okay. The women who wove one of the curtains, wove the curtains for the Beis Hamikdash, they were not paid from the remainder, from the Shirayim, from the Trumas Alishcha. They were paid from a new money set aside, mitrumas bedek habayis. They were paid from the funds that were there for maintaining the Beis Hamikdash, the general fund. The bedek habayis in today's terms would be called the general fund. So let's use our shul as an example, BJC, as opposed to money that is restricted, let's say, for construction. then there is money that's collected for the general fund. So if we had to paint the walls of the shul, it would come from general funds. Rav Chana does not come from the Trumas. It doesn't come from the main shkolim of the Trumas Halisha. It comes from the money that were donated to the Bedek Habayis, to the general fund of the Bedek Habayis. And they were extraordinarily careful not to keep the money separate. Each account is separate. Or to quote our previous president of BJC, when he gave a state of the shul, he made very clear that there was a separate account for the construction money, and that we hired an accounting firm, but we segregated that money out, and in no way did it ever get mixed up in the day-to-day running and the day-to-day budget running the thing. And now, Charlie, you're seeing where this idea is coming from. It's right here on this dot, the separating of the things. It says in the Gemara, what are they arguing? Why does one say, why does Rav say you can use the Shirayim from the Trumas Halishcha, and Rav Chuna says you use it from the general fund, the Bedek Habayis? My point. Shmuel Ovid Lo Kikar. Shmuel says that the curtains are considered like the carbon themselves, which therefore must be paid from the Trumas Halishcha, from the leftover shkolim, because the shkolim are coming to fund the communal offerings. The curtains have a din of communal offerings, so the leftover money will go towards the curtains. And the reason for that is because the blood on Yom Kippur that is bought from the communal chatas is sprayed onto the curtain. Rav Chuna Ovid Lo Kibinyan. Rav Chuna says that no, the curtains are no more than the status of the temple construction. That's what they are. It's true. Once a year, you do spray blood onto the parochis that separates the Kodesh from the Kodesh HaKadosh. But in reality, the curtains are there as part of the overall construction, and construction falls out in the Bedek Habayis in the general fund. Amir Rav Chizkiah says of Chizkiah, Torah Rav Yehuda, God Gudus, Rav Yehuda got Gudus taught in the Baraisa, Haketoris, Chol Kavanos, Hatzibur, Boy, Mitumas Halishcha. He's adding now. The Ketoris, the incense, and all carbon Sibas communal offerings are paid from the shkolim withdrawn from the Trumas Halishcha. Mizeb Mizbeach Hazav Kol Klei Shoros Vayim Mimoisa Nesachim. But the golden altar, that means the Mizbeach Hazav, the outside altar, the inside, I'm talking Mizbeach Hazav, the Mizbeach HaPnimi, the inside that was in the Heichal, the smaller Mizbeach, and the Klei Shoros, or the sphere vessels, are paid from the excess of the Nisachim that came along. And the Nisachim that came along with the Kabbanis, the yayin, and the meal, and the grains that came along with them. This is from those extras we paid for this stuff, according to Rabbi Yehuda Gad Gudus. Mizbeach ha'olam ha'heichel v'hazorah ispoim milishchas Bedek Habayis. The Mizbeach ha'olam, which is known as the Mizbeach ha'chitzon, the copper Mizbeach outside in the Azorah, the outside Mizbeach, and the Beis Hamikdash's Heichel, the Heichel of Beis Hamikdash, and the courtyards, those are paid from the general fund. Chutz la'azaris boyin milushi and the stuff in Yerushalayim outside the walls of the courtyard, are paid from the remainder, from the shirayim, from the leftovers of the Trumas Alishka of the treasury chambers. So now we found the mandala that's beginning to spread things out. There are things paid for the actual shkolim. There are things paid from leftovers from the socket, and there are things paid from the leftovers that of the Trumas Alishka. 10b5. 10b5. So, Frank, the Gemara, Vahatani Avne Yerushalayim, the stones of the Yerushalayim, of the stones of the city wall. Moilin Vahen are subject to Me'ilah, that if they're used inappropriately, Yechayiv Me'ilah, V'chiyesh Me'ilah B'Shalayim. But is there such a thing as Me'ilah on leftovers? In other words, the original shkolim are holy. Once I use them and I only have some leftovers, those leftover monies don't have a din of holiness. If they don't have a din of holiness, I can't be over on the Elah. You can only use something inappropriately if it has a certain amount of sanctity. So how could you tell me that the walls of Yerushalayim are paid for? Their upkeep is paid for with the Shirayim of the Trumas Alishka. The Shirayim don't have holiness, and yet if you misuse the walls of Yerushalayim, you chayiv on the law. Says the Gemara, that in fact Rameya holds that they do retain some sort of sanctity. The leftover monies do retain some sort of sanctities of which you could be on Me'ilah. Says the Gemara, no good. Amar Rav Chia, Klum Amar Rameya Ela B'Tzayv Shenasai. Did Rameya say this only when the coins were being used within the year of their donation? In the year between Nisan and Adar, the year when they will be given, here we're dealing where we derive pleasure from the walls of Yerushalayim way after the year they were first given. Since we know that the walls, the Avnei Yerushalayim, the stones of Yerushalayim, are subject to Me'ilah anyways, it's impossible to say that they were funded from the leftover money of the Trumas Alishka, right? Which are only, even according to Rameya, only retain their holiness in the year that they were given. Afterwards, they certainly do not. So, and yet the walls of Yerushalayim retain holiness, because if you misuse them, no matter when you misuse them, you're chayiv me'ilah. So therefore, Rabbi Yehuda Gedolis' assertion is refuted. Says the Gemara, another halacha from Yehuda Gedolis. Amar Rav Chizkiah, Tana Rabbi Yehuda Gedolis says as follows: Ashulchan v'amenorah v'mizbecha v'aparoiches. The Shulchan Azav, the golden table of Lechem Aponim, the menorah, the two Mizbeachs, HaMizbeach HaChitzon, the copper Mizbeach, the Mizbeach Azav, the Mizbeach HaPanini, and the curtain, Ma'akvin as a Kabbanis, are all essential for bringing Kabbanis. That means that according to him, if Dibra Rameh, that's the words of Rameh. According to Rameh, if I'm missing any one of these, the kabbanis are no good. Everything grinds to a halt. That's the way it is. That's the pasuk shot that we're going to learn here. The Chachamim and Chachamim say, "Ein lecha ma'akev es hakorban elo karkor v'keren." Nothing is essential for the kabbanis except for the karkor and the horn. The horn means the corners of the mizbeach that you have to spray the blood. Those are the corners, right? The corners are called the horns of the Mizbeach. Karkov is as follows. The Karkov was the lattice that was sort of surrounding the base, that was surrounding the Mizbeach. If you look at number 58 on the bottom in the art scroll, in describing the Mizbeach HaChitzon, the copper altar, the Torah speaks of the mikvah, the strip of copper lattice work that surrounded it. A pasuk says that the mikvah should be under the karka. The exact nature of the karka is a matter of dispute in Sechta Zvachim. Rebbe and Rabbi Yossi, the son of Rabbi Yehuda, Rebbe Rabbi Yossi ben Rabbi Yehuda, agree that the karka was a decorative band surrounding it. The point of contention is whether there were designs on it or whether it was plain. But whatever it was on the outside Mizbeach, that was essential for bringing the kabbalas. Okay, fine. Now, V'loi Kain Amar Rabbi Eliezer ben Rabbi Yosef ben Chanina, and this was not the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yosef ben Chanina. Tavai and Amru both say, Kol Han the Ksiv Noichach Ma'akiv. Anytime the Torah says Noichach Pnei Hashem or Bisamto HaMenoira Noichach HaShulchan, you shall place the menorah opposite the shulchan. The word Noichach opposite, that's going to be tell us it's Ma'akiv. It's absolutely vital in order for the kabbalas to be good. Selah ain't a ma'akiv. Placing on the side is not ma'akiv. Where the pasuk says, "V'ashulchan titein al selah tzafay," and the table shall be placed on the north side of the tabernacle of the Mishkan, there that is not ma'akiv. V'amar Rav Shmuel bar Nachman b'shem Rav Yonasan. No, even placing on the side is the Torah's way of saying it is essential, it is vital, and that the kabbalas are not good if any of this is missing. We are now on Yud Aleph Amud Aleph, today's daf, 11a1. We are on 11a1. Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachman says, "Afilu sima ma'akiv." Even if the pasuk says sima, set in place, which is usually said with regard to klei hashores, usually said with sacred vessels, right? That tells us that it becomes its placement is essential for the validity of bringing kabbalas. So these three Amoraim that seem to take, how do they explain our Mishnah's view, which is that only the karka and the altar are absolutely essentially for the validity of the public offering? Says Rabbi Chanina, Kan ba'avodos b'fnim, kan ba'avodos b'chutz. Our three Amoraim who are saying that there are many other things that make it ma'akif, make it absolutely essential for bringing the kabbalas, are talking about kabbalas that are brought inside the heichal. When the kabbalas say you only need the horns, the corner of the mizbeach, and the lattice design on the mizbeach. We're only talking about those that are done in the Azara, in the outer sanctum, which is not quite as holy, and therefore placement is not as essential. Says the Gemara Vayta, Amar Rabbi Chanina, I'm sorry I'm going slow, but all of this is what we call in Yiddish fremde things, strange to us. We're never going to bang, we don't bang into these things very much in Shas at all, and they're very technical in their approach. Amar Rabbi Chanina, shechatzis gedoyla hoisu b'bnei kahanim gedoyla. There was a great gaiva, as it were. The English uses the word pomposity. It was a great, but they were very pompous among the kahanim gedoyla. She yoisem yishishim kipei dov hayois. But they needlessly spent more than 60 gold talents on the ramp's construction for the Parah Aduma. Okay? For the Parah Aduma. Shahaya Kipsha Shopara Oimid, from the ramp from the previous Parah Aduma was still standing. And not one of them, and yet not one Kohen Gadol got his own Parah Aduma on the ramp that was built by the previous Shekalim. He would demolish the old ramp and build up his own a new ramp with his own money, wasting all the 60 talents of gold. Yosef ben Ula Kamei de Ramona. Came Rabbi Ula and refuted this in the name of Ramona. But Tani, it's taught Shimon HaTzadik, the great Shimon HaTzadik, the great Kohen Gadol of the second Beis Hamikdash, one of the few great Kohen of the second Beis Hamikdash. Shimon HaTzadik, Shimon the righteous, Shtei Paras also, was zeichet to bring 2 Parah Adumas during his term. And yet, he did not take out the second Parah Aduma on the ramp that he took out the first Parah Aduma. Shimon HaTzadik, are you going to say that Shimon HaTzadik is pompous? So then, why did he build a new ramp? It's because of the high standard of purity of making sure that it's taught for the Parah Aduma, or Silsu B'Parah, and to show honor the mitzvah of the Parah Aduma. Today we learn Zozin be'uchisav beams and walls were extended from each side of the ramp, blocking the view of those who were leading the Parah Aduma. So that the Arabs should get curious and lean over the side and maybe lean over a grave and thereby becoming Tomei and passing the Parah Aduma. I just want to take 1 minute here. This Gemara is very applicable to today. So Charlie, we're building a new shul at BJC. There's a lot of discussion. Should we make it with all the bells and whistles? Isn't that overkill? Should we do this kind of chairs? Should we do this kind of thing? Why are we spending so much money? We're a laid-back shul. Let's leave it. We don't need to be so pompous, etc. In this Gemara, you see 2 different ways of thinking. If it's purely to pat ourselves on the back that we're finally becoming that we're overtaking BRS, and so we're really going to make a Taj Mahal of a shul, that's pomposity. If on the flip side, we're saying it's because we want to have a beautiful Beis HaKnesses and Beis Medrash, for the high standard of Tahara that we're looking for, or Silsehu, it is for the honor of the mitzvah, that's a different argument. And it really is truly very important to think about that. A shul, it's not, I know it sounds strange, but how a shul is constructed, and I don't just mean the physical, but the spiritual underpinnings of it, as you can see in many places in Shas, like here, are the essence of what it's going to be. So if the purpose of it, of the shul, is to say, Zeh Keli Vanveyu, this is my God, and I will beautify him, and that's what the conversation is about, then absolutely. So the truth is, every meeting of that committee should start off with Zeh Keli Vanveyu. This is Hashem is our God, and we want to beautify him. And the only question is, how are we going to do it? If it's that thought process, that's literally what Shimon HaTzadik did here with regard to the Parah Aduma, even the second Parah Aduma that he brought. And Shimon HaTzadik was such an honor of him, he's the only Kohen Gadol that's called HaTzadik. HaTzadik, the righteous. In Kozeh, he built a beautiful ramp just to bring the honor of the Parah Aduma. And the Gemara says, no, that of course he's lauded for it. He's lauded for it. The other Taharim Gedolim who brought it for the self-grandizing, because they wanted to say they got rid of what the old Kohen Gadol did, because everybody should look at me, look, I'm bringing the Parah Aduma. In other words, to perpetuate their own history, to perpetuate their own legacy. No, if that was the purpose, then that is the wrong reason entirely. Further, says the Gemara, Rabbi Akiva Omer, Ein Niskartin. He said, we do not engage in commerce with stuff that belongs to Hekdesh. So this was a big machlokes in the Mishnah between Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Shmuel said, let's do business. Let's take, he said like this, go back. Moses, I'm just going back to Tebi, I'm just going to say it out loud. Moses Shiyore Lishcha. What did they do with the surplus of the remainder of the shkolim? If you remember, 3 boxes who were emptied out before Pesach, before Shavuos, the leftover was covered over with the leather cover. After they emptied out the 3rd box, they went back to the 2nd and the 1st. What happens? You get to the end of the year, and now you have left over from the leftovers. Shirayim of the Shirayim. So, Rabbi Shmuel says, take it. Go buy from them wine, oil, and flour on the wholesale market, and then resell it on the retail market, which means make a beautiful profit. But and the profits will go to the Beis Hamikdash. Rabbi Akiva went nuts and said, you can't engage in commerce with the funds of Hekdesh, and now the funds collected for the poor. Now, we explained then, knowing this tomorrow was coming, that Rabbi Akiva is not completely against it. If the stuff is there, and it's left over, and you simply sell it in order to raise money for the Bedek, other things in the Beis Hamikdash, that's fine. But to initially sell it on the wholesale market so that you could then resell on the retail market, that's Mekach HaMemka. That's buying and selling, says Rabbi Akiva, that I do not hold. Okay? So, says the Gemara, even according to Rabbi Akiva, but even Rabbi Akiva says that if he stipulates that when I'm doing this, buying it wholesale and selling it retail, that all profits will go to Hekdesh, and any losses from the speculation, I personally will take on. I will cover all the losses so that Hekdesh will not lose, can only gain, but cannot lose. Mutter is mutter. That is one way to learn this Gemara. The other way to learn it is that this Gemara is actually talking about Rabbi Yishmael. This that Rabbi Yishmael allowed us to purchase with the leftovers of the leftovers, wholesale to resell at retail, is only where you stipulate that any possible losses will be covered privately so that the Hekdesh can only gain and never lose. But if we do not do that, even Rabbi Yishmael would say you cannot get yourself involved in this. Rabbi Akiva, according to this version, then would say, absolutely not. I don't care. You cannot buy wholesale and sell it for retail. But we're going to go with the first shot, which is that Rabbi Akiva is limiting and saying, where do I say you can't have any business? Only where there's a possibility that the Hekdesh can lose. Where Hekdesh cannot lose, there I'm not going to do myself, then it's okay. Says the Gemara, like the story with Barzino. Who collected money for his Simon for orphans, and money was collected. Simon was given to him as a deposit. But also to show that Ramona, he went to Ramona and said, listen, can I make money on this money? Can I invest this money? So I make more money? On the way, someone said, yes, you can. But if you go ahead and that any losses will be incurred by you, will accrue to you you will have to cover all of your losses, and any profits will go for you to buy the show that it's allowed. Next case, Rabbi Barada is the Rabbi Barada had money that collected these and gave it as a deposit. That's exactly what he did. He invested money in the market in order to put the money. Any possible losses are covered by me. So you know the famous line that is said by every broker when they advertise on the radio, investing can come to losses. Right? We always say that investing, you need to know that investing, there are no guarantees you can lose. This is along with Mara. Mara says,
Charlie, are we breaking up a little bit?
Jerry, I hear you. Can you hear me? Jerry,
I hear you, but it seems like we're breaking up from time to time. I just want to make sure Charlie's on the same thing. It's my Wi-Fi or your Wi-Fi?
No, I think it's Yitzchak's.
So he is breaking up, right? Yeah, you're breaking up.
Yeah.
One second. What I'm do. 1 second. I'm logged on my phone. My phone, I think, give me 1 second. I'm just going to go over
It
here.
just started now.
Right. No, he had a little bit at the beginning, a little bit at the beginning, but now it got bad.
Yeah.
You're
right.
Again. It's better now.
Not really.
Now. So it's finished. It's good. It's good. Can you hear me?
It's breaking up. It's breaking up. It's breaking up. Yeah.
It's breaking up again. And 1 second. 1 second.
You're very.
I'm trying to
You're very choppy. Very choppy.
Wi-Fi data. Okay, Wi-Fi data.
Okay.
Okay.
Here we are. Get out over here. Hold on. Okay. Can you guys hear me better now?
Yeah, much better.
Much better.
Okay. Okay. So that's what I told you. When this happens, let me know right away, and I'll switch to the phone. For some reason, the phone is better than the computer. Okay. So, bottom line here is what we were saying is that your ability to invest funds that are holy funds. So let's say, for an example, we've collected money to do construction for BJC, but the money is sitting there because of Corona. So we say, you know what? Let the money make money. Let's invest it. You can only do that and not simply leave it in a money market. You can only do that if you say, if there are any losses, we're going to cover the losses personally. The shul cannot lose money. It can only gain money. And that's what we're saying over here. Very carefully, again, and that is the reason why you have to be very careful on communal funds. You cannot speculate with communal funds. Okay?
So I want you to know that came up.
Oh, it did.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
With Madoff.
Just
with Madoff in
recently,
Yeshiva University.
And the decision was made. We're going to get minimal interest because we're not taking a chance. We can't invest it. It's a huge risk.
Right.
And it's not our funds. So
and
it's exactly this. Right.
It's exactly this. You need to understand, Chazal understood the word speculation means exactly that, is as close to gambling as it were. That's just the reality. The stock market on some level is gambling. It's gambling. In other words, I'll give you an example in my family. We have a rule. In development, we do not go into development only in real estate that's already there. It came about because an uncle of mine, through marriage, invested a lot of money in Canary Wharf in the late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah.
Remember Canary Wharf?
Sure.
Reichman and those guys, and they
Right.
lost their shirts because they built a beautiful, beautiful edifice, but they forgot to make sure that the train will be connected from downtown London to there. One simple little thing. And so that rule came about. Now, what is that rule? Development has great risk, great reward. Great risk, great reward. My family, we are adverse to risk. We'd say less risk, less reward. In Hebrew, we say the Gemara's lashon is tefasta meruba loy tefasta. You grab too much, you grab nothing. Otherwise known in Yiddish, Jerry, you'll appreciate this, chatnish kahai selection. Don't grab hot noodles. In other words, right?
In English, it says the pigs get slaughtered.
Yeah, there you go. Exactly. So the truth of the matter is today we are having a problem in our world, otherwise known as OPM, other people's money. There are many guys who quote unquote are getting rich. You're investing other people's money. The example of this is all the guys who in the last 5 years or so got into the real estate market, taking on loan to value of up to 80%. Those buildings are today, of course, underwater because of Corona, etc. The values have dropped. So when they're going to have to refinance, they're going to have a huge problem because the buildings are underwater. This is, of course, a great problem. It's a problem because we forget these rules that the Gemara constantly throughout Shas, it throws at us, not in a lecturing way, but as in a given way. As in other words, this is what people are. This is what people are. This is the way people operate. People don't change. There's nothing new under the sun. Since Shlomo Melech, he meant people. People don't change. And if people don't change, you have to behave a certain way. But certainly with communal funds, you have to go and be very careful. And remember the great rule. If it sounds too good to be true, it is. And that is as best to explain the Madoff rule that all of us have to operate on. Mikan la'abah. If you're being told that you will make a great rate of return year over year over year, it's too good to be true. It sounds good and you make money, but it's too good to be true. And we have to fight our own internal inclination to go for the easy money and really think about it. Says the Gemara Vaita, 11a2. Moisa Paris, the remainder that came from the fruits, i.e. the profits, right? The ruling of the Mishnah is like Rabbi Yishmael. The Rabbi Chia by Yosef Posa, Masnitzik and Rabbi Chia by Yosef interpreted the funds mentioned in the Mishnah, the words Elois, mean Moisa Paris Schal, the remainder that came from the fruits. In other words, the profits earned by Hegdish from the sale of the wine, the oil, and the flour that was purchased on the wholesale and and sold on the retail market. The excess of Nesachid, Zu Sa'ar Revius. This is Hegdish's indirect profit made from the fourth set. And this is fascinating. The Gizbarim from the Beis HaMikdash, the Gabayim, the administration of the Beis HaMikdash, would contract and pay for the wine, flour, and oil a full year's supply of these items. They would pay for at the current rate, at the current market rate of the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, as it were. Nonetheless, in order to protect the Beis HaMikdash, it was stipulated in the contract that if, in fact, the price would drop, then the guys who are selling them the commodities have to cover for the price drop. since we're paying up front, there's a chance that the Beis Hamikdash is paying too much money if the price drops. So if the price drops, the guys who are selling, who are getting the contract, have to cover for the price drop and have to give us more stuff. Or flip side, if the price rises, so now the people who are selling to the Beis Hamikdash are losing. Nonetheless, they have to suck up the loss. The Beis Hamikdash does never get a loss. It remains at its foresaw and never more. So in other words, here again, the Beis Hamikdash is being protected. It can only break even or gain on the price fluctuations. The people selling to the Beis Hamikdash, either have to take up the loss if the price drops, or if the price rises, or cover cover with extra stuff if the price drops. Rav Yochanan Posa Masnisin, Moisa Peret Susa Revius, the remainder that came from the fruits from the prophets. This refers to Hegdish's indirect profits from the fourth saw. Moisa Nisachim Libre Rootzin. The excess of the Nisachim refers to the overbrim of measures. If you ever poured a cup of wine into a cup, as you know, a little dome forms when you fill up the cup all the way, and then it spills out. The same thing with the Nisachim. When they filled up the Klei HaShares, they didn't fill it up exactly even to the top. They would put a heap. They would heap on top until it started falling off to the side. And then they would flatten it. And so the extra in the heap would be gathered up and sold, and they would make money to be used in the Beis Hamikdash. So we have a machlokes over here. According to the first way, that the profit from the sale of the wine and oil and the flour from the shirayim of the Trumas HaMishcha, and Moisa the Chosim went to the Saravias. Rav Yochanan says no. The Moisa Paris means the Saravias, and Moisa the Sachim means the overbrim of the measures. So we are now on 11A3. 11A3. I just want to get us onto Amud Beis so we don't fall too far behind. Okay? Says the Gemara, the less later Rav Chia by Yosef Lebreitzuin. We're on 11A3. But does Rav Chia by Abba not hold that Hegdish profits do come from the overbrim of measures? Everybody agrees that we keep over and above the lip on every Klei HaShares, and then we flatten it out and there's extras. Rav Chia by Yosef says that whatever was done with the fourth seh was also done with the overbrim of measures. In other words, where Rav Chia said, he also meant, and this is where I also apply the overbrim of measures. Good. According to the opinion of Yosef and Chanina by Yosef, the Mishnah makes sense. A mistakrin b'shal hegdish. Rabbi Akiva, we do not engage in commerce with the funds of hegdish. Afloy b'shal aniyim, not even with the funds of aniyim. Lefichach said, therefore, the end of the Mishnah, it says Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Chanina did not admit to Rabbi Shmuel the possibility of profiting from the oil and the shemen, the wine, the oil, and the flour that that you purchase. In other words, purchasing on the wholesale market and reselling it as a resale. Al data to Rabbi Yochanan Kasha, but according to Rabbi Yochanan, says that the remainder of the fruits, the peiros, comes from the fourth seh. That's a problem. Why would Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Chanina dispute that? Nobody disputes that. Everybody says the fourth seh, when the Beis Hamikdash buys a contract for an entire year for wine, oil, and flour, we go ahead and we protect the Beis Hamikdash on the future fluctuation. If the prices go down, the people who are selling them the commodities have to cover the drop in price, and if the price goes up, they have to eat it. So, and nobody disagrees with this. So if we're talking about that the word Moisa Paris, the extra of the Paris of the prophet, means the fourth saw, according to Rabbi Yochanan, why would Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Chanina and our Mishnah disagree? Hatanina, we learn, Amdu Bishalosh, if somebody committed to supplying flour to the base of Mikdash at 4 saw per selah, the price of the flour rose. So it stood at 3 seh per selah, Yisapik Ma'arba. He nonetheless has to supply at the original 4 seh price because the drop has to be eaten by the supplier. The Beis Hamikdash does not lose out on the future fluctuation on the price agreed upon. Utaninan, and yet we learn that Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Chanina do not agree with Rabbi Shmuel that you're allowed to profit for you're the permission to make a profit on the fruits. So how could this be? So how could Rabbi Yochanan tell me that the words, the fruits, profit the fruits means the fraud? So says the Gemara, how you might have the payers became Slamizbeach. Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Chanina do not agree when it has to be the dessert of the altar, i.e., the extra kabonei tzibur, when the mizbeach was lying fallow, when there was nothing being brought on the mizbeach, we would pull out these extra carbonate tziburs that we purchase, and use them as dessert, as it were, on the mizbeach as extra carbonates, just so the Beis Hamikdash should not be sitting empty. This is where Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Chanina say, no, you can't use it for profits because it's going directly on the Mizbeach, and it just does not look proper to have to be, that the monies to get it are involved in Mekach and Mefka. But they were moided with the clay shares and the sturdy vessels, and it was perfectly fine to use this heaps that you're getting and the additional 4th saw of gain that you got on a future contract that you can use. A little further, so I only know that the overbridge from the public offer may be used to purchase service vessels. But what about the overbring from a private offering, something in Sachin that was brought with for a carbon yachid? There, that was also had an overage piled up. Are you allowed to purchase clay sharis or not? Clay sharis by Michel Yachid. Will it not be found, therefore, in that case, that clay sharis are being purchased from private offerings? And the problem with that is clay sharis are used for everybody. So how can you have a private person? And for the Gemara, like we learned yesterday, a woman who makes a tunic for a kain gadol's son. Kishere, it's okay. Tim Serena with Tzibur, as long as she transfers it into the public domain, and then they could be used. We are now on 11A4. I'm just trying to get us up to Amid Beis, so at least we're only on Amid off. It says the Gemara, Ad Kedoi Berutze Lach. I only know about overbrims, like I explained before. When you pour wine, you get a rim above the rim. You get a dome above the rim. What about dry offerings? When I have dry grains and I overflow it, does that remain sacred? Is that sacred? 11A4 on the bottom, right before the Mishnah Gimel. Says the Gemara, what it called? Because liquids displace each other. Think about it. Liquids are automatically connected, the top to the bottom. That's how a mikveh works. When you want to do hashaka, it connects one water to the other water. But but solids clearly are individual units. The thing on top is not connected with the thing on bottom. So the thing on top, which is piled up above the lip of the Klei Hasharis is piled up above the holy vessel, the sacred vessel, was never actually in the vessel. If it's never actually in the vessel, then it never became holy. Water, liquid, even if it's above the vessel, it's connected with the water that's in the vessel. It's indistinguishable. So therefore, I can say it became holy from the Klei Hasharis because it's connected with what's inside the Klei Hasharis. But solids, you can't make that argument. So what's the halacha? After the Gemara, that's a good point. Like we learned in the Mishnah. Later on we're going to learn this Mishnah. This Mishnah is in Menach. Sorry. Hanesachim should be clean. The Nesachim that were made holy in a Klei Hasharis, Bimsav Zebach Kosel, and then the carbon that was being brought along with these Nesachim was found to be invalid. Im Yesham Zebach Acher, if there's another sacrifice that needs the Nesachim, Yikru Bimon, it could be offered with it. But if they were left overnight, Yipsu Belino, they became puzzled overnight. In any case, the Mishnah stresses that in order to become holy, the Nesachim had to become holy within a Klei Hasharis, within a service vehicle. It must be in the ear rights of the Klei Hasharis. That means where that's lacking, for an example, in the case of the overbrim of a dry offering, there the offering would not become sacred. Because again, only the overbrim of a liquid, which is connected with the liquids that are inside this ear space of the Klei Hasharis, could be considered to be part and parcel of the one liquid. But dry, each unit is not connected with the other unit. Anything above never went within the walls of the Klei Hasharis. It does not become sacred. Let's go a little further. Halacha Gimel. We're just trying to get to Amid Beis so that we're not too far off.
Unfortunately, I have to leave. Catch up tomorrow. I'll catch up on my own.
Very good. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to get us. I'm just going to get us like somewhat. Let me just say exact. I'm going to 11b2. Okay. I'm starting with on 11b2 tomorrow.
I'll be good.
Okay? Very good. Says the halacha. Have a great day, Charlie. We'll speak. Very good. What did the Kisparim, the treasurers of the Beis Hamikdash, do with the leftover Ketairis? The Ketairis, right? What did they do in the upcoming year? What did they do with the leftover incense? They would set aside a measure of the leftover Ketairis equal to the wages of the artisans of the Beis Hamikdash. Those who worked in the Beis Hamikdash, kept the Beis Hamikdash beautiful. And how did they do this? They were mafresh. They deconsecrated the incest upon the monies of the artisan. The monies of the artisan, which we're going to explain, means they took money from the Shekalim to pay. They went ahead and they took this extra Ketairis. They deconsecrated it on this money, on the leftover money from the Shekalim. And then they gave the deconsecrated incest, which is now chulin, because its kedusha went on to money, to these artisans for their wages. Then they would turn around. And then they would repurchase this incest, 11A5. They would repurchase the Ketairis from the artisans with the new withdrawal of the new Shekalim of the new year from the Trumas Salishcha. So therefore, the reconcerted incest is now fit to be used for the thing. So in other words, you had leftover You had leftover incest. What you did was took it, you were mafresh it against money. So now the money became holy, and the ketayris became unholy, became chulin. You handed it to the artisan. You then turned around, and with the new trumas alishcha that was just given in, the new machzah shekel, you would repurchase these ketayris from the artisans. So now the artisans have the money that they wanted in the first place, and the Beis Hamikdash gets back its ketayris, which are now purchased anew with the new shkalim. So they're no longer last year's ketayris; they become this year's ketayris, which means they're allowed to be used for this year's ketayris. The imbachadis bismanoi, if the new half shkalim, chat machzis a shekel, were brought in their proper time before Chaydish Nisan, like Chenaisim Mitrumas Chadasha, the Gizbarim would purchase the Chulin Ketairis that were now in the hands of the artisans with the new shkalim. But in Lav, for whatever reason, there was a stall, and the Chamatzis Shekel was not collected by the first of Nisan. So what do? Now I have this ketairis that used to be holy in the hands of the artisans. I'm allowed to, b'di evet, use old leftover money from the Trumas Alishcha to go ahead and repurchase the ketairis. What am I allowed to do with this ketairis? Since it's now been purchased with last year's money, the Gemara is going to have to tackle. Says the Gemara, what are you talking about over here? How could you say that a concentrated object was deconsecrated upon another concentrated? What did we just say? That the ketairis was mafresh to chulin upon the wages of the temple artisans, but the money to pay the artisans itself was holy. Where did the Beis Hamikdash get the money from? They had to pull it out of where? One of the pushkas. Those monies are holy. So all you did was transfer holiness onto something that's already holy. You can't do that. You can't have double holiness. The money that you're originally using over here is, where did it come from? The Beis Hamikdash doesn't have private money. The Beis Hamikdash's money is communal money. It's holy money. So you can't take the holy ketairis and mafresh it on holy money. That's not
But
right.
you could take the shiure shkolim, the one that which are not holy.
Says the Gemara. Okay, so obviously, Daddy, we're holding like Rameir. The Gemara previously said that our Mishnah is like Rameir. Rameir holds
that is holy. Right,
you could
right.
still do Mila. Exactly. So we have to be talking according to Rameir. The question doesn't start unless you're all like Rameir.
Right.
Rayim is Rameir. So says the Gemara, Ketzad, who I say, what is the Beis Hamikdash do? What is the trustee of the Beis Hamikdash do?
Where are you now? The Omid
On
base?
the bottom line of 11A5, Yud Aleph Amid Aleph. The last line of Yud Aleph Amid Aleph. Omer Rav Shimon ben Bisna, says Rav Shimon ben Bisna, maybe Moyes Umechala al Binyan. He brings money for the artisans and deconsecrates, mafresh the money upon the structure that they build. And then, since the new building structure was generally constructed from non-holy materials, you brought the materials from the lumber yard. The structure served to deconsecrate the money. That's what they did. So there was another step. They take the money, they bring the money, and they're concentrated on the supply that they're bringing to fix the Beis Hamikdash. So now the supplies became holy, and the money that's now in their hand is no longer holy. And then we begin to do it. So there's a fourth level to how you do this. Now we're on 11B1. Yud Aleph Amid Beis. maybe Ketoiris, and they brought the Ketoiris, who maybe Ketoiris, umechalal aleihem. And then they would bring the leftover Ketoiris and deconsecrate it upon the money. Okay? Since the money that's now in the hands of the workmen, of the artisans, has now chulin, because you took the holy money and you took its holiness and put it on their supplies, making the money chulin. Now you take this leftover Ketoiris and you switch it for the money. So the money becomes holy, and the Ketoiris now in the hands of the artisans becomes chulin. And then they give the new incest to the artisans for their wages, and then they proceed to buy with the new lishka, with the new shkalim, they buy back the money from the artisans.
Why do you have to do this? If they take the shkolim, which are holy, right?
Yeah.
And you deconsecrate on the shkolim on the wall that they built, right?
Right.
So now the shkolim are not holy anymore.
Right.
So pay the workers with that money.
Good. Here's the thing. What do you call it? You got
why give them the Torahs and then go back and forth?
The answer is because you had to pay them right away when they were working. The Gemara is going to say this. Watch, learn. Look at the next piece of Gemara. Hold your thought. This money, what is done with it? Rebbe Oimerani, Yanastu Lebeis Garmu Lebeis Aptinas. Give it to the house of Garmu and the house of Atinas. Shoyu Bikim Bipitum Aktoiris Umaisa Lehem Lechem Aponim. Who were expert in compounding the incest and in preparation of the ponim bread, of the Lechem Aponim. Amar Rab Shmuel bar Rab Yitzchak. Daddy, say the next words. V'hoyu shayu chayovim lahem moyis mishal rishon. They have where they owe the money from the beginning for their work of the previous year. Where these families were not owed for the previous year's work, it could not be paid from these funds. You see, the problem is this. The Gemara is thinking of your question. The answer is, when are they owed the money? Are they owed the money from last year? Work they did last year, they weren't paid yet. Then I could use the old shkolim from the Trumas Alishka to pay them. But if they're not owed money yet from old, but they're going to be owed from the new year, a new contract, then you can't pay with the old money. Now you got to pay with the new money. But also, Daddy, you're not allowed to withhold their wages. You have to pay the wages every night. Remember the halacha. How are you going to do that? So now I've got to use this whole system to get out of this problem.
Right. Okay.
That's the Gemara was bavoning your kasha right there. That's the issue. It says the Gemara, Rav Chia bar Ba says, if they did not owe the workers money from the beginning, worked them for the previous years, what is done with the money that was used to deconsecrate the Ketairis? Because we have two different problems going on here. What am I doing with the leftover Ketairis, which I'm not allowed to use for the new year because it's last year's Ketairis? No,
so you deconsecrate.
Yeah, so no different than Shekalim, which is last year's Shekalim, can't be used for this year's purchases. Every year stands on its own.
Right.
So I got two problems. I got to pay them, and I got to deconsecrate. I got a double problem here. I got the Ketairis that I got to deal with, and I got to find money to deconsecrate to give to them. So it's always a two-step. It's a two-step dance. I got to clear the Ketairis, and I got to clear the money so that the Ketairis doesn't end up in the garbage, but instead could be used for next year by being first sent to Chulin and then reconsecrated for the new year.
Reconsecrate with the new Shkolim. Yeah, okay.
So it's a galgal, and that's why the whole thing has to take place. Omer up here, because the Gemara was bothered by your question. Let's just go straight through. The answer is every year. This is no different than in business. You have an income statement and a balance sheet. A balance sheet is perpetual. It looks at your balance perpetually. An income statement only looks at a 1-year picture. What was the income this year and the expenses this year? That's how the base of Mikdash ran. You had the budget was a year-to-year budget. You don't mix funds from 1 year to another year. You don't mix ketairis from 1 year to another year. Each year stands thing, but then you run into a problem. When I've got leftovers, what am I going to do with them? I don't want them to go to garbage. So, says the Gemara, also Rav Chia bar Abba Baba, the same Rav Yosi, Makaitzin es Mizbeach, we provide the thirds of those Mizbeach. In other words, the dovis of carbon tzibur when the Mizbeach was quiet. Rabbi Barba Koyin Boy Kamei Rav Yosi, Bechlabte she tossed the Rav Chia bar Ba. The opinion of Chia bar Ba has been reversed. Here in the question he found it, he said, what's to be done with the money? Do you use to deconsecrate the ketairis, which implies that he was unsure of the halacha. Because pshitale here, it's obvious to him that it's used for the dessert for the mizbeach, right? That it's used for the mekaitzim behenes of mizbeach, and the tzrichale, the clay assurance, with regarding using the money for clay shores, for the service vessels. The pshitale, the mekaitzim mizbeach. With regard to purchasing clay shores, he's not sure what to do. To use it directly for the mizbeach, the components on the mizbeach, that he has no problem. He said, there you can certainly use that money for that because it's still the original purpose. And this is where we're up to, and we are up to 11b2,